Hello students, hope you are doing good. I'm going to begin the first chapter, Power Sharing of Political Science, Class 10. We'll resume the tour of democracy that we started last year. We have already discussed last year that an intelligent sharing of power among legislative, executive and judiciary is very important to the design of democracy. Today, we'll talk about power sharing with an introduction to power sharing. We'll go with two case studies, one of Belgium and another one of Sri Lanka. These two case studies are extremely important because as an example, we would utilize it in the upcoming chapters as well. We'll understand the ethnic composition of Belgium and Sri Lanka. We'll identify the communities and regions of Belgium and Sri Lanka. After this lesson, you would be able to identify and locate Belgium and Sri Lanka on a world map. You would be able to tell the story of Belgium and Sri Lanka. Also, you can list the communities and regions of Belgium and Sri Lanka. Look at this picture. Observe the picture. There is a girl standing in front of a blackboard and she is putting an equation based on the idea that came in her mind about power sharing. So, in the first instance, if anybody would listen to the term power sharing, that could clearly be the idea. So, she has written sharing power equals to dividing power equals to weakening the country. It means when you share something, it gets divided. And if something gets divided, of course, that would weaken something, isn't it? However, is this the case? Is it true? Let's find out. At first, what power sharing is? Power sharing is a political arrangement in which different or opposing groups all take part in government together. Like last year, we have discussed about legislative, executive and judiciary. So that is like sharing of power in the government. Sharing power is not dividing power, but strengthening power of institutions of democracy. In order to understand power sharing in a better way, let's brainstorm. Let's think over it. I'm giving you an example from your real life experience. Let's say there are 4 class monitors in your class. One is from blue house, another one is from green house, another one is from red, and the other one is from yellow house. And in this hypothetical situation, imaginary situation, let's say I as a teacher favor blue house, and the members or the students of blue house are never punished. Other houses are punished and they are not favored. In this situation, let's brainstorm the ideas. What would happen? What other houses and the members of other house would think about blue house and the leader of the blue house? Because blue house is getting all the privileges. Let's write down the points. Let's think over it. After brainstorming, you would have got several ideas what other houses would feel about blue house. And I am pretty sure that your ideas would be similar to what I have mentioned in this slide. The other houses would have feeling of hatred. There would be tension in the class. There would be fight. There would be conflicts. There would be displeasure. There would be dissatisfaction. And the other houses and the leaders would feel that they are disregarded, they are alienated, means separated. And the atmosphere of the class would never be a healthy atmosphere. The same would be the outcome of not sharing power in any sphere, in the political sphere or any sphere. And as we are discussing specifically in the political sphere, so yes, that would be the situation. Now another situation, second situation, in which everybody is equally respected, everyone has their own say, and teacher gives value to all the houses. The atmosphere of the class would be very good, and all these issues would automatically be resolved. Now we have two case studies, Belgium and Sri Lanka. We'll go ahead with case study of Belgium, which is a European country, and Sri Lanka, which is an Asian country, to understand power sharing and its importance. Before going forward to the case studies, it is very important to understand this term ethnic division. You all must be familiar to the term ethnic. When you go to a mall, when you go to any e-commerce website for online shopping, you find a particular section that is ethnic section, and that is like ethnic wear. So in the ethnic section you find traditional wear, all the traditional clothes. So from there we'll connect it to ethnic division. So when we say division in the society, which is ethnic or ethnic division, it is based on two keywords that you need to keep in mind. One is shared culture and the other one is common descent. Descent means origin. So it is like similar origin or similar forefathers. So two keywords that you need to keep in mind. Ethnic division has, one is shared culture, another one is common descent. So very simply, now we can define ethnic division as a social division based on shared culture. People belonging to the same ethnic group believe in their common descent because of similarities of physical type or of culture or both. They need not always have the same religion or nationality. So I believe you are clear with the meaning of ethnic division. Now let's observe the location of Belgium. The geographical location of Belgium is in Europe. You can see here on this world map, it is just north to France. It is, you can see, in between Germany and France, you have Belgium. Let's have a general idea about Belgium. It is a small country in Europe and it is smaller in area than the state of Haryana. It has borders with France, the Netherlands, Germany and Luxembourg. It has a population of little over 1 crore, that is about half the population of Delhi. The most important thing in Belgium is that the ethnic composition of this small country is very complex. Belgium, communities and regions. Please observe this map. There is the map of Belgium, and understand the communities and regions of Belgium through this map. So the map is divided with different colors. You can see at the top it's yellow in color. Southwards, downward, you can see it is red in color. Southeast, it is shaded. Nearly at the center, you see a small region, orange in color. And that is the capital of Belgium, which is Brussels. The yellow region at the top is called Flemish region, and it is a Dutch speaking region. The population of Dutch speaking people is 59% of the total population of Belgium. Southwards, you can see Wallonian region. The concentration of population is of French speakers. It's a French speaking population dominated area, and the percentage of French speakers is 40% of the total population of Belgium. In the southeast, you see German speakers, 1%, and the most complex structure is found in the capital city Brussels. In capital city Brussels, 80% are French speakers and 20% are Dutch speakers. Now you can clearly gaze upon the distribution and the complex ethnic structure of Belgium. Let's talk about the situation of Belgium between the 1950s and 1960s. The minority French-speaking community was relatively rich and powerful. You all know it very well. Last year also you have studied about French speakers and you have studied about French Revolution. So French is always considered as the language of aristocrat commonly, and French speakers were always rich and powerful, and this was resented, not liked by the Dutch speaking community, who got the benefit of economic development and education much later. So French speakers were highly educated, rich, powerful, and due to this there had been tension between the Dutch speaking and French speaking communities during the 1950s and 1960s. And the tension between the two communities was so acute that it was very difficult to handle in Brussels. And the reason is very clear. 80% French speakers and 20% Dutch speakers. Brussels presented a special problem. The Dutch speaking people constituted a majority in the country, but a minority in the capital. So consider a situation if people in the country would be suppressed. I'm talking about the Dutch speakers. If they suppress French speakers anywhere in Belgium, the repercussion was there in Brussels because the population of French speakers was more in the Brussels, in the capital. So it was a very fiery situation and a situation of conflict and tension. Now look at this map to have the geographical location of Sri Lanka. You can see this world map. On this world map, you can see the location of Sri Lanka. I understand that you are already aware of the location of Sri Lanka. It is southeast to India, to the southernmost corner of India, and it is an island country. You can clearly see it on the map of this world. Now let's have an overview of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is an island nation just a few kilometers of the southern coast of Tamil Nadu. It got independence in 1948, 1 year later than India. It has a population of about 2 crore people. Like other nations in South Asia region, Sri Lanka has a diverse population. The major social groups are the Sinhala speakers 74% and the Tamil speakers 18%. Now let's discuss the ethnic composition of Sri Lanka. If we see the ethnic composition of Sri Lanka, the ethnic division is in 3 categories. The first one is Sinhala speakers, and they constitute 74% of the total population. Huge population of 74%. And they are Buddhists. And the second category is of Tamil speakers. They are 18% of the total population. Hindus and Muslims constitute the Tamil speakers, and there is a further division of Tamil speakers. There are 2 categories under the Tamil speakers, you can see here. The first one is of Sri Lankan Tamils, and their population is 13%. And the second category is of Indian Tamils, and their population is 5%. So out of 18%, 13% Sri Lankan Tamils and 5% Indian Tamils. And now the third category is of Christians, and they are nearly 7% of the total population. Here I would also like to tell you about the categorization of Sri Lankan Tamils and Indian Tamils. Who are these Indian Tamils? First, Sri Lankan Tamils are the native population of Sri Lanka. They are Tamils. And Indian Tamils are those Indians who were migrated to Sri Lanka as bonded laborers for tea and coffee cultivation under the British rule. Now let's discuss about Tamil speakers again. Among Tamil speakers, there are 2 subgroups. Tamil natives of the country are called Sri Lankan Tamils, 13%. We have already discussed that in the previous slide. The rest, whose forefathers came from India as plantation workers during colonial period, means British rule, are called Indian Tamils. As you can see from the map on the previous slide, Sri Lankan Tamils are concentrated in the north and east of the country. Most of the Sinhala speaking people are Buddhists, while most of the Tamils are Hindus or Muslims. There are about 7% Christians who are both Tamil and Sinhala. So we have got an idea of Belgium as well as Sri Lanka, about the ethnic division, ethnic composition of Sri Lanka and Belgium. Now think and imagine. Just imagine what could happen in situations like this. In Belgium, the Dutch community could take advantage of its numeric majority and force its will, its desire on the French and German speaking population. This would push the conflict among communities further. Very simple. This could lead to a very messy partition of the country if both sides would not agree, if both the sides would claim control over Brussels. On the other hand, again in Sri Lanka, the Sinhala community enjoyed an even bigger majority and could impose its will, its desire on the entire country. We'll discuss what happened in both these countries in the next class. Based on what we discussed today in this lesson, I have assignment questions for you. The first one is list the possible outcomes when power is not shared. We have already discussed that. What do you mean by ethnic division? You are very clear. You can put the answer here for ethnic division. Discuss the ethnic composition of Sri Lanka. Discuss the ethnic composition of Belgium. Describe the situation of Belgium and Sri Lanka. So while describing the situation of Belgium and Sri Lanka, you need to tell about the ethnic composition of Belgium and Sri Lanka. You have an MCQ assignment with this particular link. I am posting this link in the description also. You can simply click on this link and answer the questions there. It will be evaluated immediately. Once you would submit it, you'll get the answer and you'll get your score as well. You would be able to answer all these questions on the basis of what we have discussed today. Thank you. Have a great day. Hello students, hope you all are good and you have already gone through the previous session, the video lesson of power sharing. I'll continue from there. We'll take forward the journey of power sharing that we ended in the previous video lesson. So today we'll move forward with power sharing. As in the previous one, we have discussed about the case studies of Sri Lanka and Belgium, and we stopped at a point where we had this curiosity to know what happened later in Belgium and in Sri Lanka. Now the topics that we'll study today, they are completely interlinked with the case studies that we studied in the previous video lesson. So we stopped in the previous lesson at a particular point from where onwards we had a curiosity. What happened next? What happened next in Sri Lanka and what happened next in Belgium? So today we'll talk about Sri Lanka. So the topics are majoritarianism in Sri Lanka. We'll understand what majoritarianism is. Majoritarianism measures according to the Act of 1956. We'll also study why a feeling of alienation cropped up among Sri Lankan Tamils. The specific objectives and expectations that I have from today's lesson are as follows. You'll be able to define majoritarianism. You'll be able to list the provisions of the Act of 1956. Also, you would be able to analyze the reasons of feeling of alienation among the Sri Lankan Tamils as well as Tamils. We already got this idea about Sri Lanka that Sinhala speakers were in majority, and of course they got the power And after getting power, what they did was establishment of majoritarianism. Let's understand the meaning of majoritarianism. So, majoritarianism is an ideology that the majority community rules a state or a country in whichever way it wants. Whatever they wish, they start doing. So that is majoritarianism. It was implemented in Sri Lanka by the Act of 1956. A law was passed in Sri Lanka, and based on the law, based on the act, majoritarianism was implemented in Sri Lanka. You can see a newspaper clipping here in the background of the slide, and it is talking about majoritarianism. Justice Deepak Gupta of Supreme Court directed that rule of majority is an integral part of democracy. That is absolutely fine. But majoritarianism is the antithesis of democracy. It is not as per the principles of democracy. Majority ruling, it's all right. However, majoritarianism is not good. Now let's move forward to majoritarianism in Sri Lanka. We have already discussed that Sri Lanka got independence in 1948 in the previous class. Now, after getting independence, the leaders of the Sinhala community sought to secure dominance over government by virtue of their majority. As they were in majority, they wanted to create their dominance in the country. As a result, the democratically elected government adopted a series of majoritarian measures to establish Sinhala's supremacy. So they adopted different policies and steps and measures to implement majoritarianism in Sri Lanka. Now the question is, how majoritarianism was implemented? Like, what were the provisions? So what they did, they passed an act, a law in 1956. And on the basis of this particular act, they implemented majoritarianism in Sri Lanka. So let's go ahead with the provisions of the Act of 1956 in Sri Lanka. The first point is that Sinhala recognized as the only official language, thus disregarding Tamil. So you can imagine if your language would not be given importance, you would feel very bad. The same thing happened in Sri Lanka. What they did, that they considered only Sinhala as the only official language, and they considered Tamil as useless. They disregarded Tamil. All the government functioning, all the documents, all the proceedings, everything started in Sinhala. Thereafter, the other provision of the government was they followed preferential policies. So they started giving preferences to Sinhalas in the job applications, in university positions, in government jobs, everywhere. Sinhalas got preference. Other than this, a new constitution was there, and to the new constitution, the state shall foster Buddhism, shall promote Buddhism. We have already discussed in the previous class, if you remember, that the language, the Sinhala speakers were Buddhists. They followed Buddhism. So other religions were also disregarded. So these 3 points very clearly, Sinhala became the official language, preferential policies that favored Sinhalas, and Buddhism promoted. Now, I would like you to recall the previous class in which we had a brainstorming session. We brainstormed ideas based on the condition when power is not shared. What could have been the outcome? And the points that we have got, similar points here. So, what happened when majoritarian measures were adopted in Sri Lanka? So the first thing, it created feeling of separation, alienation among Tamils. Tamils felt separated. They felt that they are alien in their own country. Conflicts and tensions arose. There had been conflicts and tensions between Sinhalas and Tamils. Next is very important. I'm not sure whether you have heard the name of LTTE. So Tamils formed militant terrorist organization. That was LTTE, Liberation Tigers Tamil Elam, to fight against the majoritarian government. And this organization was a terrorist organization. So they started fighting with the government like a war. LTTE demanded separate Tamil state. They wanted a separate Tamil country. So they wanted partition of the country to have a new country for Tamils. So the meaning of Elam is state and state is country. LTTE's demand moved to a direction in which civil war started in Sri Lanka. So civil war started in Sri Lanka. It's very important to understand the meaning of civil war. Whenever there is a war between two countries, that is simply a war. But if there is a war inside a country, that is considered as civil war. A violent conflict between opposing groups within that becomes so intense that it appears like a war. So such condition is known as civil war. And I would say civil war is more dangerous than a traditional war. In the background you can see the flag of Sri Lanka. Now the next topic here is reasons for feeling of alienation among Sri Lankan Tamils. All the lessons are interconnected. We have already got the base in the previous lesson, in the previous video lesson. Now, on the basis of that, you can simply correlate it. Here, the reasons are very simple. The basic reason, if I say, because the power has not been shared. So, the first thing, they felt that none of the major political parties led by the Buddhist Sinhala leaders was sensitive to their language and culture. So, they felt that their language and culture had been disregarded. Another thing is that they felt that the constitution and government policies denied them equal political rights. If you are living in a particular country, any country, you would like to have equal rights. But equal rights have been denied in the country. They have been discriminated in the jobs, in the employment opportunities, as well as other opportunities, and all their interests have been ignored. As a result, the relations between the Sinhala and Tamil communities strained over time. So there had been intense conflict between the Tamils and Sinhalas. Now it's very important to know about LTTE. LTTE, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Elam. It was a terrorist organization. The path that had been chosen by the Tamils was a violent path. So they started a violent fight with the government through this organization. This organization was also known as Tamil Tigers. Its leader was Vellupillai Prabhakaran. He led LTTE. Its operation started on 5th May 1976 and till 18th May 2009 it remained active. In fact, after the death of Prabhakaran, LTTE disbanded. The motive of LTTE was the creation of the independent state of Tamil Elam in the north and east of Sri Lanka. Its ideology. Let's talk about the ideas on which it functioned. It was based on Tamil nationalism. It was based on separatism, to have the country separated. It based on revolutionary socialism. It also talked about secularism. And right now its status is that it is inactive. I already said that after the death of Prabhakaran, LTTE disbanded. See the picture, that was the flag of LTTE. Now let's talk about the demands of Sri Lankan Tamils or LTTE. The first demand was to make Tamil as an official language. They wanted regional autonomy. It means power in their particular region where their concentration is more. Other than this, they wanted, of course, equality of opportunity in securing education and jobs. And as we discussed earlier as well, they wanted a separate Tamil state, a separate Tamil country after the partition of Sri Lanka. And an independent Tamil Elam in northern and eastern parts of Sri Lanka. So for these demands, LTTE started violent struggle against the government for their demands that turned into civil war that ended after the death of Prabhakaran in 2009. So their method of struggle was a violent struggle. They started attacking on the government for their demands, which finally ended in 2009. Now it is very important to understand the relationship between India and LTTE. Look at this picture. I believe you would have identified the picture. He is our late Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. He was the Prime Minister of India between 1984 and 1989. During this period, the condition of Sri Lanka was very bad because of the civil war, and hence Sri Lankan government requested for help, and the then Prime Minister Mr. Rajiv Gandhi sent Indian peacekeeping forces to Sri Lanka, and that was sent to establish peace in Sri Lanka, to stop the civil war or suppress the civil war. However, due to this, LTTE considered Mr. Rajiv Gandhi as their enemy, and they attempted to kill Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. Finally, on 21st May 1991, at Sri Perumbudur, which is in Madras, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. He was killed. And you should know this, that it was the first time that a human bomb was used by any terrorist organization to kill someone. And unfortunately, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated by LTTE. You can have more information about the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi and LTTE in a movie that was released in 2013. The name of the movie is Madras Cafe, and it was starred by John Abraham.
अन्ना आर्म्स नहीं सरेंडर करेगा।
अब ओवर्ट ऑपरेशन से काम नहीं चलेगा। गेट ऑल कोवर्ट ऑप्स रेडी।
विक्रम, हमें हर हालत में अन्ना चाहिए। राइट सर।
मैं ऑलरेडी इलेक्टेड लीडर हूँ। मेरे एक लेजिटिमेट आर्मी है। वी विल फाइट इंडिया टू। दिस इज गोइंग टू बी अ लॉन्ग वॉर।
Intercepts between Jaffna and Madras वो decode हो गए हैं. There is a plot to assassinate the ex-PM. This is a serious threat and we need to move fast.
कुछ डिस्कशन किया? कोई assassination का डिस्कशन?
किसका assassination?
Raj Shekhar did have a crucial meeting in Madras Cafe.
कुछ दिन पहले कुछ LTF के ग्रुप्स आए थे।
कहाँ सप्लाई किया explosives?
मुझे ये सॉर्ट आउट करना बहुत जरूरी है and I'll do it my way.
ये LTF कैंप का पोजीशन है। याद रखें, हमारे पास सिर्फ 8 मिनट है।
जो हम देखते हैं, सुनते हैं, सच सिर्फ उतना नहीं होता।
Hi, this is John Abraham and subscribe to www.youtube.com/Viacom18movies and get all the exclusive content on my film Madras Cafe, releasing on the 23rd of August at a cinema hall close to you.
Now, finally, it's time for the assignments. So, based on what we studied today, you have these assignment questions. I would request you to answer all these assignment questions in your notebook. And of course, please follow the writing guidelines and the instructions. The questions are, the first one is, what is majoritarianism? Write 2 drawbacks of majoritarianism. So you can easily write down the drawbacks of majoritarianism. List down the main provisions of the Act of 1956 that established majoritarianism in Sri Lanka. You need to mention all the provisions, like Sinhala became the official language and all. Enumerate any 3 demands of Sri Lankan Tamils or LTT. The questions could be asked in several different ways. So the verbatim of the question could be different as well. For example, the question could be asked like, what were the demands, or mention the 3 demands of LTTE. The answer would remain the same. The next is, trace the developments which took place in Sri Lanka leading to civil war in that country. So what has happened in Sri Lanka, you understand, in the provisions of majoritarianism. So because of those things, people felt alienated, people felt separated. Now, the question is here, do you think that the steps taken by Sri Lankan government to establish the supremacy of Sinhalas were justified, be long lasting? Give your viewpoint. Okay. Thank you. Hello students, welcome back to the third day of power sharing. So we'll resume from where we stopped in the previous class. In the previous class, we completed the case study of Sri Lanka. In this class, we'll talk about Belgium. What happened in Belgium unlike Sri Lanka? Let's find out. The topics that we'll study today are accommodation in Belgium, significance of Belgian power sharing model, comparative analysis of Belgium and Sri Lanka. After this video lesson, it is expected that you'll be able to tell about the power sharing arrangement in Belgium. Also, you could compare the power sharing arrangement between Sri Lanka and Belgium. Let's see the accommodation in Belgium. It's really important to understand the power sharing model adopted by Belgium. How Belgium accommodated everyone, all the ethnic division in the country conveniently. Although the path was not simple, the Belgian leaders took a different path, a completely different path than what we have observed in Sri Lanka. They recognized the existence of regional differences and cultural diversities. They understood that it is very important to respect others' values, others' culture, and it is important to accommodate regional differences and cultural diversities to have a peaceful country where everyone could live conveniently and easily. And hence, between 1970 and 1993, they amended, means made changes in their constitution 4 times. And these amendments were to work out an arrangement that would enable everyone to live together within the same country. Like you have seen in Sri Lanka, that they were demanding a separate Tamil state, and here you see that everyone lived in the same country. The arrangement that they worked out is different from any other country in the world, and it is really innovative. The leaders have realized that the unity of the country is possible only by respecting the feelings and interests of different communities and regions. Now let's talk about how was the Belgian power sharing model, which model they adopted after the 4 amendments that they did. So constitution amended 4 times and 4 levels of government formed: central government, state government, capital government, and community government. So 4 levels of government formed. The different levels of government formed on the principle of equal representation. Constitution prescribes that the number of Dutch and French speaking ministers shall be equal in the government. Quite good. So an adjustment both the communities did for equal representation, and there had been no issues between these two communities. No single community can make decisions unilaterally, it means alone. Many powers of the central government have been given to state governments of the two regions of the country. And I would like to mention here this arrangement in which power is divided into different levels of government is known as federalism. We'll discuss more about it in upcoming lessons, as well as we have a separate chapter, that is the second chapter, in which we'll talk about federalism. The state government were not considered subordinate to the central government. Brussels has a separate government in which both the communities have equal representation. So quite unique. They have got a capital government, and in the capital government, again, there was principle of equal representation. 50% Dutch ministers and 50% French ministers. The French-speaking people accepted equal representation in Brussels because the Dutch-speaking community has accepted equal representation in the central government. So, Dutch speakers compromised at the central level and French speakers compromised in the capital government. Apart from the central and the state government, there is a third kind of government which was quite unique, which is quite unique, that is the community government, which gave power sharing to all the communities. This community government is elected by people belonging to one language community, Dutch, French and German speaking. No matter where they live, this government has the power regarding cultural, educational and language related issues. So you all are already aware, in the previous video lesson we have discussed the ethnic division of Belgium, in which we have discussed that the percentage of German speakers was only 1%. Still, they got sharing in the power. So that created a very good atmosphere in Belgium. And that is why we consider Belgian model as a unique model of power sharing. As we have already gone through the Belgian model in the previous slide, let's talk about the significance of Belgian power sharing model. Belgian model is a unique model of power sharing, undoubtedly. It indeed is very complicated even for people living in Belgium. Still, it is one of the best model in the world in which everyone got the accommodation, everyone has got the opportunity to share power. But these arrangements have worked well so far. They help to avoid civic strife between the two major communities and a possible division of the country on linguistic lines. When many countries of Europe came together to form the European Union, Brussels was chosen as its headquarters. Now we have two pictures here for picture perception and analysis. In the first one, you can see this girl is using a magnifying lens that shows that she has analyzed everything and she has checked everything about Belgium, and she is thinking What kind of solution is this? I'm glad our constitution does not say which minister will come from which community. It depends on the situation. Yes, it is true that we don't have any such arrangement, and that is because of the ideals in our constitution. We have a secular government, and based on that, we don't have any such division on the basis of which ministers could be chosen or any position could be given. However, in Belgium, although it was really complicated, but still that resolved the issue, that satisfied the different communities, the different ethnic groups, and eventually the solution was good. Now on the other side you can see another picture, and of course I am not aware of the language here, but as per the description you can see here that both the language Dutch and French is used in the picture. So on the signboard both the languages are used to respect both the languages, unlike Sri Lanka, where you remember that Sinhala became the official language of Sri Lanka and Tamil was disregarded. So we should respect all the languages, and that has been done in Belgium. Now, as we have completed both the case studies, today about Belgium, we discussed the power sharing model, and in the previous video lesson we discussed about Sri Lanka. So after going through both the case studies, we can easily compare both the case studies, both the countries, and we can have a comparative analysis of Belgium and Sri Lanka. Let's compare. In this line, the first point you can see here, majoritarian policy in Sri Lanka led to conflicts, led to civil war, while accommodation policy led to peace in Belgium. It means the adjustment at one place, they started living together, they adjusted everything, so that policy led to peace in Belgium. The next one, majoritarian policy in Sri Lanka led to demand of separate state for a particular linguistic group, while accommodation policy made all linguistic community to live together in same country. So majoritarian policy was a divisive policy. However, the accommodation policy was a policy that made the country united. There was a political instability in Sri Lanka, civil war happened, and the country became politically unstable. However, despite complex structure and despite complex constitution, the political stability established in Belgium became stable. Now the next point is that development was hindered in Sri Lanka due to civil war. Of course, if there is any war that hinders, that become an obstacle in the path of development. While Belgium, one of the important places in Europe and got headquarters of European Union. So by these two examples, it can be concluded that power sharing is a sustainable model for governance, stability, peace and development. So you have got all these keywords here, that power sharing is a sustainable model for governance, stability, peace and development. Now you have this question to think and conclude. Annette studies in a Dutch medium school in the northern region of Belgium. Many French-speaking students in her school want the medium of instruction to be French. Selvi studies in a school in northern region of Sri Lanka. All the students in her school are Tamil speaking and they want the medium of instruction to be Tamil. If the parents of Annette and Selvi were to approach respective governments to realize the desire of the child, who is more likely to succeed and why? So the clue for this question is very simple, what you have studied. So where the power sharing exists and where the power sharing does not exist. So first case is of Belgium and the second case is of Sri Lanka. So of course in Sri Lanka there is no power sharing model. Think over it. You can easily write the answer with the specific points. As we have completed today's class, it's the time for assignments. All the assignments are based on what you have studied today. So the first question is, Belgium produced a unique model of power sharing. Justify the statement. You need to explain about the different things adopted in Belgium that produced a unique model. The second one, comparison. Compare the different ways in which the Belgians and Sri Lankans have dealt with the problem of cultural diversity. So in both the countries, there had been cultural diversity. There is cultural diversity. How they tackled the situation, that you need to compare and write in the answer. Please follow the writing guidelines. Thank you. Hello students, welcome back to the day 4 of power sharing. We'll continue from where we have left in the previous class. We have discussed about both the case studies extensively, what has happened in Sri Lanka, what has happened in Belgium. Now we'll move forward towards the conclusions. Why it is important? Why power sharing is important? The topics that we'll study today are reasons of power sharing, the categorization, prudential and moral, why power sharing, need of power sharing, advantages or benefits of power sharing. So why power sharing is important, what is the need of power sharing, what are the benefits or advantages of power sharing, all are same. With this video lesson, the expectations are that after the end of this video lesson, you'll be able to distinguish between prudential and moral reasons, and you would be able to point out the need of power sharing. Now from the previous classes, we are very clear. Any which ways, power sharing is something which is good. No question about it. Now, what are the reasons for power sharing? Why power sharing is required? Why power sharing is good? We can categorize the reasons into two categories. One is prudential and another one is moral. So all the reasons, all the justification of power sharing would be categorized into these two categories. Let's understand what are these two categories. The first one is prudential. When we say prudential, that is based on profit or loss. When you do something, there is a reason behind it. Very simply. Scientific. Practice maths to score good. Right? Study hard to get maximum marks. So whenever there is a particular relationship of profit or loss, such reasons are prudential. If you are doing something, there is a reason behind it. So that says that it is prudential. Another category, moral reasons, which is based on morality. Morality says what is good, what is bad, ideal conditions. It talks about ideal conditions. For example, we should respect our parents, right? So this is something which is an idealistic view. It is good, we definitely should, but you would not ask the reason behind it. You would not ask why. But in prudential, you ask the reason, you get an answer. For the moral, you do not ask the reason. You simply understand, okay, we should touch feet of our parent, so that is moral. That talks about morality, respect elders, love children, moral. You would not ask why. So, why would be like justified. As you have already understood, the meaning of prudential reasons, which is based on profit or loss. So, reasons based on prudence, that is profit or loss, is called prudential reasons. Prudential reasons stress that power sharing will bring out better outcomes. So, it tells that if power sharing is implemented, the results would be undoubtedly good. Prudential decisions are usually contrasted with decisions based purely on moral considerations. So prudential reasons tells you that yes, there is a reason behind it. This is the logic behind it. However, in the moral reasons, it doesn't tell about a particular reason. That is something which is just ideal. The example of prudential reasons you can see here is reservation. Like reservation has been given to the backward communities, there is a prudential reason behind it. The prudential reason is the upliftment of the backward communities. Now let's talk about the prudential reasons for power sharing. What are the prudential reasons? So the first thing, very simple, it reduces conflict between social groups. So if power sharing is implemented, like we have seen the example of Belgium, it reduced all the chances of conflicts between the Dutch speakers and the French speakers. Another point, very important, it ensures stability. The government becomes stable. No issues with the government if power is shared. It ensures unity of a nation. There won't be any chances of partition of the country. There won't be any chances of differences among the people. So of course, in that case, the country would remain united. It avoids civil war situation. If Belgium would not have adopted power sharing, there might be a possibility that there could have been civil war as well, like Sri Lanka. Reduce the feeling of hatred, dissatisfaction, and establishes harmony. Of course, so any feeling of hatred, dissatisfaction, and dissatisfaction would not be there, and it would establish harmony among everybody. Now the next thing is imposing the will of majority community over the minority may look like an attractive option in the short run, but in the long run it undermines the unity of the nation. So majority community puts his desire on minority community, like we have seen in Sri Lanka. And we have found that it is okay, it has been suppressed. Finally, the Sri Lankan government were able to suppress the movement, suppress the minority, and eventually, forcefully, they established peace. So it's looking okay in the short run, but yes, in the long run, it is undoubtedly a question mark to the unity of the nation. The next point here is tyranny. Okay, that is the use of absolute power. like monarchy, kingship, of the majority is not just oppressive for the minority, it often brings ruin to the majority as well. So, if majority community establishes its tyranny, uncontrolled uncontrolled power, then it is not only harmful for the minority, it would be harmful for the majority as well. Because if they would fight, if there would be unrest, if there would be conflicts, then majority would also suffer. So we can see all these points support and tells you about the prudential reasons for power sharing. Now let's talk about moral reasons. What do you mean by moral reasons? So it is based on morality, as we have discussed in the previous slides. It is a representation of idealistic view. What is ideal, what is good, what should be in the society. It emphasizes the very act of power sharing as valuable. So it says that, okay, it is valuable, it is good. Why it is good? You'll not ask, right? Because it's not prudential reason. So in moral reasons, it is good, it is idealistic, it is valuable. Example is decentralization. So decentralization means giving powers to the lower levels of government. For example, central government, state government, and local self-government. So that is decentralization. You would study more about decentralization in the next chapter, which is federalism. So we have got an idea about moral reasons, that it is something which is ideal. And we do not ask a question for that. So while giving moral reasons, you would use should sentences, right? So you would use should sentences that shows that it is good, it is ideal, we should do it, the best practices. Now, what are the moral reasons for power sharing? Now, power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. It means it is the soul of democracy. We should understand it. Participation of people should be there for legitimate government. Legitimate means something that is authorized by law, which is correct, which is good, that is something which is right. So, if there is a legitimate government, the moral reason says that people's participation is necessary, it is important, it is inevitable. So there should be people's participation for legitimate government. You can see here. Next one, people have a right to be consulted. Hence, power sharing should be adopted. Got it? So you have got these things with the should sentences, and the first one clearly says that it is soul of democracy. So we are very clear what are the different moral reasons for power sharing. Now we have something to discuss. Look at the picture. You can see the picture here, and it is showing the German government, fine German engineering. We all are already aware that German technology is considered one of the best in the world. So when you look at this cartoon, you can see here the cartoon at the right refers to the problems of running the Germany's grand coalition government. That includes the two major parties of the country, namely the Christian Democratic Union and the Social Democratic Party. The two parties are historically rivals to each other. They had to form a coalition government because neither of them got clear majority of seats on their own in the 2005 elections. So imagine the situation that two major political parties who are completely against each other, and because of the challenge in the country that no one got majority, and you all know it is really expensive to have elections. So after the election in 2005 in Germany, what has happened, that the two major political parties of the country, namely the Christian Democratic Union and the Social Democratic Party, both of them came together and formed a coalition government. Let's compare it with India. Imagine BJP and Congress combining together and forming the government, both with different policies. Similar situation happened in Germany, and it had become very difficult to run the government, but still government run. So that shows that power sharing plays an important role whenever we want to control a situation, whenever we want to have a strong nation. So a strong nation, a controlled nation is possible with power sharing. Now guys, it's time for the assignments. So all the assignment questions are based on what we have studied today. The first question is, write 3 prudential reasons why power sharing is desirable. Distinguish between prudential and moral reasons is the second question. Third, sharing of powers makes a country more powerful and united. Do you agree with this statement? Why? I believe you would be able to answer all these assignment questions. Thank you and have a great day. Hello students, welcome back to the day 5 of power sharing. Today we'll complete the chapter. In the previous class, we discussed about the different reasons behind power sharing, and now we'll go forward with the different forms of power sharing. The topics that we'll cover today are forms of power sharing and the difference between horizontal and vertical power sharing. The expectations from today's class are you'll be able to explain the different forms of power sharing. You would be able to distinguish between horizontal power sharing and vertical power sharing. Also, you would be able to define political parties, pressure groups, and movements. Now let's gather the key points for forms of power sharing. What are the different forms of power sharing? How power is shared in modern democracies? What are the different ways in which power is shared in different democracies? So the first way is among different organs of government, like legislative, executive, and judiciary. The second is among different levels of government, different levels from higher to lower level, like central government, state government, and further local self-government. And in Belgium, as you remember, we have studied about another one also, that was community government. The next way is among different social groups. The different social groups also share power, and power is shared among political parties. Political parties definitely share power, and power shared among pressure groups and movements. So the first form of power sharing is among different organs of government. We are already aware the different organs of government. the different organs of government are legislative, executive, and judiciary. So all these organs share power. Legislative is the body which makes law, and executive is the body which implements law, and judiciary interprets the law. Since all these three organs are at the same level, hence they are known as horizontal distribution of power. Their division of power or sharing of power is considered as horizontal distribution of power. Any of these organs can't exercise unlimited power. Each organ checks the others, means each organ controls the other. If legislative wants to become so powerful by making any law, that won't be possible. Executive and judiciary are there to control the power. So all these organs of government are controlled by each other. Hence, it is also known as the system of checks and balances. You can see the last point here. All of them balance each other's power among various institutions. So the power is completely balanced. Any organ cannot become so powerful or cannot exercise unlimited power. Now we are done with the first form of power sharing, that is among different organs of government. Now we have the second form of power sharing that is found in modern democracies, is among different levels of government. So the power is shared among different levels of government. So the first point here in this is two or more levels of government, and this is also known as federal government or federalism. So we have arrangements like central government, state government, local self-government. So these are examples of federal government or federalism. So here we can see that power is shared among different levels of government. We have got a very good example of community government of Belgium. I believe you remember that it had central government, state government, then capital government, and also community government. And this is called vertical division of power because it is going from top to bottom. So it is like vertically power is divided. In this case, Constitution lays down power at different levels. Constitution fixes what would be the power of the central government, what would be the power of the state government, and further other governments. We'll study more about it extensively. There is a separate chapter for this, and that is federalism. So in the next chapter, we'll extensively study about such power sharing arrangement. The next form of power sharing is among different social groups. Social groups are the different groups in society. Like we have seen the ethnic division, Sinhala speakers, Tamil speakers, French speakers, Dutch speakers, German speakers. In India, we have different religion that could be considered as social groups. So all these are social groups. So power may also be shared among different social groups such as the religious and linguistic groups. Clear? The best example is the Belgium model. The community government in Belgium is a good example of this arrangement because you have seen what has happened in Belgium. For all the three different communities, regardless of their percentage of population, shared power. Dutch speakers, French speakers, and German speakers all became the part of this community government. So, an excellent example of power sharing among different social groups. In some countries, there are constitutional and legal arrangements whereby socially weaker sections and women are represented in the legislatures and administration. You have examples of reserved constituency. There is a bill also pending in the parliament, that is Women Reservation Bill. You are aware of it. It is still pending. But yes, the arrangement is there. The system of reserved constituencies in assemblies and the parliament of our country is a way of power sharing among different social groups. This type of arrangement is meant to give space in the government and administration to diverse social groups. Such arrangements ensure that no one in a country would feel alienated from the government. Of course, if power would be shared among different communities, among different social groups, no social group would feel alienated. No social group would feel separated. Like in Sri Lanka, you have seen that Tamils felt separated because power was not shared in Sri Lanka. This method is used to give minority communities a fair share in power. So it gives a fair share in power to the different social groups. Now the next form of power sharing is power sharing among political parties. Political parties are extremely important component for democracy. They share power and they strengthen democracy. So we all know that in a democracy, citizens have freedom to choose among various political parties, various contenders for power. Somebody believes in the ideology of BJP, other believe in ideology of Congress, some believe in ideology of any other political party, and based on that people cast their vote. And in contemporary democracies, this takes the form of competition among different political parties. Of course, there would be competition. Every political party would try to do the best for the people. Then only people would decide to which political party they should choose. And such competition is in fact very good. Why? Because that ensures that power does not remain in one hand. And in the long run, power is shared among different political parties that represent different ideologies and social groups. For example, we have a coalition government, right? Different political parties form an alliance, means come together and contest election, and they form a coalition government. And in a coalition government, you know that different political parties come together, and different political parties have different viewpoints and different ideologies, and they would represent different social groups as well. Based on that, they would suggest the policies, and eventually the policies which would be made would take care of all the citizens of the country or of a state or of a particular place. So coalition government is a very good way to share power Other than this, the political parties who fail to form the government, their role is also very important. What they do, they control the government. They control the government by asking questions. So whatever steps the government would take, those steps could be challenged by the opposition party, and hence it would improve the decision making. Also, that gives a share of power to the opposition party. Thus, we see that power is shared among political parties. Now, the next form of power sharing is among pressure groups and movements. It's very important to understand pressure groups and movements. First, talk about pressure groups. So, pressure groups are organizations. They are organized. They are organizations who are not the part of the government, but they pressurize the government to take decisions in their favor. The examples of pressure groups are like big business houses, Tatas, Ambanis, student unions, trade unions, farmers associations, industrial workers. All these are example of pressure groups. Let's understand what they could do. They are not part of the government, but they influence the decision making process. For example, let's talk about big business houses. They are financial giants, and any government could not ignore big business houses. So, these big business houses pressurizes the government to take financial decisions or different sort of decisions that could favor them. Directly, they are not part of the government, of course, but still they pressurize the government, and thus we can say that they influence the decision making process. The industrialists, let's say there are industrialists, the organization of industrialists, they would also do the same. They'll pressurize the government, they would influence the decision making process. They'll not take decision, but yes, they'll influence the decision making process. I am repeating this particular keyword because this keyword is extremely important. So two things you need to keep in mind, that they pressurize the government and they influence the decision making process. Two keywords. Industrial workers, trade unions would go for a strike, and thus they would pressurize the government to increase the wages. The farmers can go for a strike and government would take decision in their favor. Now let's talk about movements. So as we have talked about pressure group, let's talk about movements as well. Movements also do the same thing. They are not part of the government. They pressurize the government and they influence the decision making process. Movements could be very small or very big. They are not organized. They are not an organization or permanent organization. They are kind of loose organization. So they are formed for a particular objective, a particular goal. Once the goal is accomplished, once the objective is fulfilled, movement gets over. Let's understand it with a simple example. Let's say in a particular locality, in your locality, let's say, there is no electricity for 3 days. So, people in your locality would come on street, go for a strike, and this strike may be supported by opposition party, may be supported by other groups as well. You went on strike, and that strike would pressurize the government to take decision as soon as possible, or to fix the issue, whatever the issue is. Eventually what happened, due to strike, the electricity reinstalled, starts working, and once your goal is accomplished, all the people who went on strike would come back. Why would they stay there for strike again? No, the strike would get over. Right? So, they pressurize the government for a particular objective. Once the objective has been fulfilled, they return back. The movement also gets over. Fine? So, the basic thing that you need to keep in mind after understanding pressure groups and movements, both of them are not part of the government, but they influence the decision making process. Clear? So that is the second point here. Pressure groups and movements are not part of the government, but they share power indirectly. So it is indirect power sharing. They also will have a share in governmental power, either through participation in governmental committees or bringing influence on the decision making process. Sometimes what happens, that government forms different committees for different purposes. Let's say if we talk about a particular scheme like skill development scheme or skill development Kaushal Vikas Yojana, you would have heard about it. In that case, the government would form committees to promote at different levels. So several small committees would be formed, and these committees would also act as a pressure group and would pressurize the government to take decision according to the best interest of the people. Got it? So in this way, we see that pressure groups and movements share power indirectly by influencing the decision making process. Although we have already discussed about power sharing by political parties, pressure groups, movements, I have mentioned the definitions here in this particular slide for your convenience. So political parties are a group of people who come together to contest election and hold power in the government. For example, BJP, Congress, RJD, Trinamool Congress, and several other political parties, Pressure groups, we have already discussed. Examples are big business houses, student unions, trade unions. These pressurize the government and influence the decision making process. So these are organizations, like permanent organizations. Movements, on the other hand, are loose organizations which are formed for an objective and influences the decision making process. For example, Narmada Bachao movement, Quit India movement, any sort of movement. We have already discussed an example earlier. I believe you are clear with all these definitions as well for political parties, pressure groups, and movements. We are almost done with the chapter. Now I have put the points of vertical power sharing and horizontal power sharing here with a comparison and the difference between horizontal and vertical power sharing. Now you do recognize horizontal power sharing is power sharing among different organs of government, and vertical power sharing is power sharing among different levels of government. Got it? So we have the difference put together here. So horizontal power sharing, an arrangement in which power is shared among different organs of government. For example, legislative, executive and judiciary. And vertical power sharing, already we are clear, an arrangement in which power is shared among different levels of government. For example, union government, state government and local self-government. In horizontal power sharing, the different organs of government exercise different powers, and this is a concept of separation of powers. So legislative has a different function, executive has a different function and judiciary has a different function, and this is called separation of powers. However, in vertical power sharing, the whole government is divided into, or the power is shared in different levels of government, and the constitution clearly defines what would be the area in which a particular government would work. The constitution clearly lays down the power of different levels of government. Now let's talk about horizontal power sharing again. It specifies the concept of checks and balances. So if one organ of government is going overboard, taking some decision more than its power, or taking some wrong decision, in that case the other organs controls, and thus we say that it's a system of checks and balances. Okay, so this is called checks and balances. There is no such concept in vertical power sharing, because powers are clearly specified by the constitution for different levels of government. Now let's discuss. You can see this picture that is in your NCERT textbook as well, and the girl is thinking, oh, in my school the class monitor changes every month. Is that what you call a power sharing arrangement? Think over it. And yes, of course, that is a power sharing arrangement. Why it is? Because it gives opportunity to all the students to share power. So we have completed the journey of power sharing. The chapter ended, and for this particular video lesson you have the assignment: define political parties, pressure groups and movements. We already have a slide for that. That's a very easy question. Differentiate between horizontal power sharing and vertical power sharing. Already have a slide. You need to do that. Explain 5 forms of power sharing in modern democracies. Okay, so you need to mention all the different forms of power sharing and explain them. Apart from all these, you would do NCERT chapter end questions. Thank you and have a wonderful day ahead.